Welcome back to Cream City Social, everybody, and we have another insightful conversation for you today. I sat down with Marquette professor and organizer Sam Harshner to talk about his campaign as he runs for the Village Board of Shorewood. I'll introduce Sam as a policy analyst. He grew up here in Wisconsin and then worked both in DC and Madison, writing the policy that affects how the government operates, interacts with us, from analyzing it and giving metrics to writing the policy itself. You'll hear firsthand how being in the thick of Act 10 protests back in 2010 at the Capitol in Madison changed how he saw politics, and what he hopes to do as Shorewood's trustee. That's what they call people on the village board. If you like what you hear and you want to get involved with his campaign, check out the show notes below. He could use all the help we can give him. And before we run our conversation, I want to ask if there are any musician listeners out there. I'm looking for intro and outro music to feature people on. I always say this is a community podcast, and to make that a little bit more true, I'd love it if we were able to spotlight a listener's music every week as the intro and outro, or even maybe a full song. I'm up for whatever. I'm not terribly picky, and super curious what your vibe of the show translates to in music. Could be real neat. So, if anyone's got any, please send it to our email at creamcitysocial@gmail.com. If you just want to talk about it first, have a conversation, totally up for it. And with that, here is a very honest conversation with someone making positive change in Milwaukee. Well, hi, Sam.
Hey, Will, how are you?
Doing good. Thanks for coming in and talking again today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. This is a fun way to spend my day. All I have to do with the rest of the day is grade. So this is my dream. This is good. Yeah.
A little reprieve before the storm.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
To break the fourth wall, I should say, a little bit. This will be our second time sitting down talking. I committed the cardinal sin of journalism the first time, recorded a lovely conversation, and then didn't put it on my hard drive right away, and then somehow slipped into the ether somewhere.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I thought about what I said after that discussion. I'm like, I had all these moments of like, what a stupid thing to say. So I'm happy to get another run at this. So it'll be great.
No, I'm excited. And so we're here to talk about your campaign for the Village Board of Shorewood. Mm-hmm. You're running. You just got your signatures on the ballot now. Here we go.
Yep.
And we're going to look into why you decided to run and why you think you're the right guy for the job.
Right. Fair enough.
But first, let's cover a little bit of basics.
Sure.
Where'd you grow up, Sam?
Grew up in northern Wisconsin, a little town called, the town I grew up in was called Arborvita, but it's near a town called Minocqua, which people know of because it's a big tourist area. So I grew up in the woods up in northern Wisconsin as a bookish, kind of left-leaning individual. So I love being up there, and I love the people I grew up with. But to say I fit in would be an exaggeration, certainly. So it was always slightly at an angle from everybody else up there. But
what'd you do after high school?
I went to college in Beloit. At Beloit College for 4 years. Wonderful experience. Really learned a ton. Exposed to all sorts of new things, new ideas, new people. After that, I worked in Madison and then went to grad school for public policy for 2 years at the La Follette School of Public Policy. After which, I headed out to D.C. and I worked for 3 years at the Department of Health and Human Services. Working on the Medicaid and what's called the CHIP program, Children's Health Insurance Program.
And what year was this?
Oh, that would have been during the Bush years.
Okay.
So an odd time for a left-leaning individual to be in government, for sure. But and certainly during 9/11 with all the pathologies, the social pathologies that went with that, very strange and surreal time to be in Washington. But luckily I did meet my wife there, and that brought it. Her kind of going to grad school brought us back to Wisconsin.
What was it like to be a left-leaning individual in the Bush administration? I'm imagining pushing change, but
yeah, I mean, with something as big as the federal government, you don't. It's difficult to push for change from within, and it's not even your role, right? I mean, I think as a bureaucrat, like
Yeah.
if you're going to be responsive to democracy, you have to be responsive to your political officials ultimately, and I think that's the role, and you have to, I mean, if you believe in democracy, you have to serve that role on some level. That doesn't mean you don't push as hard as you can to be, for humane and just policies. It just means that it is. It's not a role that really allows for advocacy at a very deep level, and which is why I ultimately, I wanted to move away from government, because it's not, it's really working within government I've met some wonderful people who are incredible public servants, but it's if you're passionate about your politics and you care and you have a distinct political vision for the world, and that vision involves kind of a significant amount of change at a structural level, you need to do that. You need to do that from a frame that allows for you to actively organize and build a political vision. And that's not within the bureaucracy. That's not the place to be. So,
I was going to say, what does it look like when you're creating policy? I was talking to my dad about this, and he was very interested, and even I'm not quite sure what a policymaker does,
Right. I mean, what usually happens, it's complex, and it depends on what part of the process you're in. And I was primarily, both at the state and the federal level, I worked in budget. And so usually what happens is the elected official in D.C. it was the Secretary of Health and Human Services. At the state level, it's the governor. The governor will have a certain kind of inclination about where they want to take policy. They'll have a what would I say? I mean, they will, they'll have an idea or two that they want to implement, and they'll shoot that out. I mean, they'll shoot that down the chain, and that arrives at you if you're in their policy area, and you're tasked with operationalizing it. So from a if you're in budget, you're looking at budgetary implications. You're working with the department to see what administrative hurdles would be involved. It's a hugely collaborative process, wherein kind of the notional ideas of the political officials turn into actual, operationalizable, I guess, policy, right? I should find a new word for that. I haven't thought about this in a long time. And then, and then that gets worked out, and the details get worked out in negotiation with political officials in the legislature, and then we go from there. But yeah, no, it's just a hugely complex collaborative process, and you're often as a public official involved in only a very small piece of it, so you don't see the whole puzzle. Certainly, yeah.
When the politician gives you a vision or a notion, does that come with metrics? Does that come with something they're trying to accomplish, and then you're trying to operationalize how you get to those?
It's not my experience that politicians are great with numbers, so usually don't get that. No. Usually you get, I need to cut the budget by 10%. Where do I cut? Or I want to cut taxes by blank. How do I do that best? And who are the winners and losers in these areas, right? So it's not, you will get politicians interested in measuring government performance, because it looks good for them to kind of be very strict with their employees, right? That's at least in the past, that was a very politically attractive thing, and also people want their operation to run as efficiently as possible. And so they will task other people with setting up government performance metrics that you can hold people accountable for. Very difficult to do. Very sometimes takes policy in very strange directions. It's good in theory. In practice, it often creates incentives for austerity, incentives for appearing like you're active, as opposed to doing policy that actually has long-term impacts. It's not always with malice, right? But sometimes with not a lot of forethought, right? So that's I worked in government performance for a while, so that's a conversation probably to go more deeply in on another day. But we'd be happy to talk about that though.
That makes sense. Can I linger for one more question?
Please do.
When they say cut the budget by 10%, is that left up to the policy analyst to say who the winners and losers are? Do we cut from transit? Do we cut from the police budget?
Right. I mean, it varies. There'll be sometimes there'll be like bright lines where it's like, you will not cut from here, or I'd like you to target this area. And as an analyst, your role is to find 5-6 different options for what would be possible. And then you find who are the winners and losers here, who benefits, yeah, exactly. What are the implications of this? And that's I think that's it's funny. I just had a memory after this. I would do that sometimes very forthrightly, like, and say like, okay, so if we do this, then like, all right, everybody, all these poor recipients of this program are going to be screwed, and these people will benefit, and I would be very forthright about like, and not even like trying to be ideological at the point, but just like being very open about like who the winners and losers were. And I got yelled at one time and called into the state budget director's office because they're like, you can't put this down on paper. And I was like, well, but that's my job. Like I have to tell you the winners and losers. And they were concerned about open records requests that they would and at the time I was naive and like not terribly. I was just trying to do my job. But I remember being like, what are you talking about? Why am I being chastised for trying to like accurately represent who the winners and losers are here? So I mean, it's political all the way down, right? It's you have to become attuned to that. It's not that Wilsonian ideal of like, oh, everybody's just a cog in the wheel, and their public servants have a duty to the public, right. And that no, you have to be very cognizant of the politics of what you're doing from the bottom on up, right? So that's a lesson. I'm glad you have so much more freedom, outside of government work to kind of actively politic and push your vision. And that's I think that's, for me, that's really it's necessary. It's really needed. For many people, they really do like the kind of the idea of being a neutral public servant. And I met many wonderful people who do really good work in those worlds. That's just certainly not something that's for me, right?
That's how a lot of scientists are in my grad work.
Okay, sure.
Where I'll be in the freshwater sciences, took a class there, and professor was talking about having students who would just create these awesome papers, do this great research about freshwater impacts of Lake Michigan, whatnot, but then just put it in a paper, send it an email, and then that's it. Mm-hmm. And her whole thing was, you got to advocate for that stuff. You're the only person who knows that stuff and how important that is. Mm-hmm. So you have to be the one that advocates for it. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine in the scientist role and in this policy-making role, that's tough to do.
It is. No, I mean, it is. I mean, it's, you're kind of formally precluded from doing that as a bureaucrat, certainly. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean you don't push people based on your values. You certainly do. Everybody does that, whether they know it or not. But it's it's hard. It's hard to you do know the nuts and bolts. As my friend said the other day, where the bodies are buried. And so sometimes you're like, oof, you see something in the news, and you're like, that's not really what's going on, but you just kind of have to let it slide if you're in that role. So I'm not in that role anymore, so I can let fly and just be very forthright, right? So my constraints are entirely different now.
And so that takes us maybe to your politics today.
Sure, yeah.
And I've heard that they've changed over time. Mm-hmm. How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, I was, kind of an Obama liberal for kind of the majority of my life, and really what changed for me, in my case, was my experience in the kind of the Wisconsin uprising in 2011, in kind of response to Walker's kind of union busting Act 10. I was a state employee at the time. I was working in government performance of all things, which is trying to find efficiencies everywhere you could find them, right? The 2010 elections really, building off of what happened in the 2008 housing crisis were abysmal for Democrats. And what we ended up with was with a massive Republican majority in the state of Wisconsin and in most state houses across the country. And Walker came in with this huge mandate, decided to use that to cut, to eliminate union bargaining rights for all intents and purposes. And I think at the time that wasn't something I was even very cognizant cognizant of. What at the time, what I experienced was, after a decade of working in federal government and federal and state government, and having kind of ceaseless, like, kind of austerity driven furloughs and pay cuts and all these things, where the only way you could ever get a cost of living raise would be to move jobs, and having all this stuff where you're just hustling all the time and feeling like you're always behind the 8 ball. What I had was an email come into my box on a Friday that cut my pay about 8%. And so I'm like, well, I guess it's never going to stop. Like, we're going to continue to get these, continue to get hammered with these things. And so, very dejected, didn't have any sense that there was any power to do anything, just felt like this was, very, very hopeless, one of the most hopeless moments, at least politically in my life. Came back in that Monday, was like, I'm not working this morning. I couldn't work. I shouldn't say. I was just. No, I was very dejected and was struggling to get anything done. So I went out and walked around this. I was working at the Department of Children and Families at the time, and was right on the Capitol Square. And so I started walking around, got a cup of coffee, and was just thinking and trying to figure out, what do I do next? Like, what do I do with my life here now? Because it did feel like there was no path forward in that world. And as I was walking around the square, I don't know if you're familiar with the geography, but one of the main avenues going into Capitol Square in Madison was is Washington Avenue. So East Washington comes up from the east side of the city, and I suddenly heard this chanting, and like I saw this line of people, which in my head is like it grows every year, but it was probably like 50 to 100 students. Who knows? In my head it's like there are 200 students, 500, like it keeps growing, but like a huge number of students, like marching up East Washington Avenue, chanting and kind of advocating on behalf of their teachers, rights to organize, on behalf of public education in general. And I was like, what in the hell is this? And it was just like this epiphany, this moment of where something sparked. And not to say that spark was coherent. It was certainly something but it was just like something broke, like some assumptions broke in my head. And as so they came up there, and they're suddenly protesting on the square. These however many students, right? 100 students. And as I'm standing there, like, people keep showing up. And so a lot of the kind of the Resistance Act 10 was driven by, early on by the TAs union at UW-Madison. And so they showed up, all these college students, other union contingents started coming up, and suddenly there's like 1,000 people out there. And I remember being like, what in the hell is going on? Like, this is, and just smile ear to ear. Like, this is cool. Like, this is something real is happening here. And so I was out there that day, and then the Capitol got occupied. And I remember, with friends who were in state government, like, none of us had ever seen anything like this. And we would walk into the Capitol and see, thousands of people in here chanting and singing, and the joy was palpable. And just thinking like, oh man, here's the answer. There's something here. Like, we can change things. We can beat this. And my wife was at Yale at the time, and I remember going out to visit her. She was on a fellowship for a year, and I was walking around New York, and we're just like hanging out. I'm like wearing my Wisconsin sweatshirt. I'm like, yeah, it's us. Like, we're doing that. Yeah, you guys, like, you guys are taking notice, right? Like, something big. I was so proud and so amazingly happy to be involved in this. And I thought like something, it wasn't. I was a participant. I was just a body out there, right? I was not planning anything. I was not organizing anything. Didn't know anything about that at the time. But it was just, it felt like something real. It felt like something substantial, something that actually was kind of a political movement that actually mirrored what I felt in my heart. And that was so powerful. That was that feeling and kind of the joy you get out of that, of advocating on your own behalf with real, kind of without apology. Is really intoxicating. And and I'm not sure if you've had these experiences, but like one of the things that happens as a result of that, and I was out there every day, right? So I got to.
So this was months or weeks.
I can't remember how long it was. In my head, it like lasted 6 months, but I need to look this up because it was probably like a period of weeks. But I was out there every night. I'd work during the day, go protest at night. Out in the weekends, there'd be huge rallies, tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people out on the Capitol. You've seen the pictures.
I was gonna say, I remember the pictures.
Yeah, met Jesse Jackson. He's a really large man. He dwarfed me. Was kind of there for all the big set pieces of the event. Snuck in the last night when they kind of pushed Act 10 through via this like procedural like kind of bait and switch. I was in there that night and yelling at leadership. Got called into the office of my boss the next day because evidently I was on TV, like pointing at a legislator and yelling. I was told that would not be acceptable going forward, but at the time I didn't really care.
I'm seeing a theme here.
Yeah, no, my favorite moment of the night was actually my dad. I was, while my wife was out in Yale, I was staying with my dad for a year until we could come back, and we were going to move to Milwaukee. And my dad got into the Capitol that last night, and Glenn Grothman was there, and he was a state senator at the time, and he was walking around. He's trying to sneak away from people, and my dad, the most gregarious kind of just like garrulous guy you've ever met, he loves people, loves talking to people. I said, "Hey, Dad, there's Senator Grothman." My dad doesn't hear me. He's like, "Oh." And just walks over. He's like, "I'm gonna go talk to him." And my dad, I still have a picture of it, runs over to what he was calling Senator Grossman, and continued to call him Senator Grossman the entire conversation, which lasted for 45 minutes, and cornered him in the corner of the Capitol, and talked at him with a state trooper standing right next to him. I have a picture of it. So no, in any case, it was I have a ton of wonderful kind of memories of being a part of that, and thought that. That sort of feeling of truth and kind of being at one with this sort of kind of with what you feel is just. And when you see so much popular energy around things, you believe that means it's going to succeed, right? And one of the things, and I think what is defined pretty much all of my, kind of my professional choices, my personal choices after this, is the fact that that's not the sum and substance of it. It's not a mystical sort of like thing. It doesn't just because you find this magic, you capture lightning in a bottle. Mm-hmm. That's not like some sort of evocation of eternal truth. That is a political moment, a political kind of a rupture that's capable of being used for political gains, but it doesn't. You don't get those gains unless you do the organizing, and that's what I had to learn. And so, I was for sure, I was sure that as soon as we got this recall election going, yeah, look, 1 million signatures on this. I mean, that is pretty crazy, right? That they got 1 million signatures on the recall petition. I thought, yeah, for sure he's going to lose, and the fact that he won it wasn't particularly close. It really was what made me really start to reorient my politics and really start to think about how I act politically and what I do with my time. And that is, so the loss was more important to what I did with myself going forward than was that kind of that road to Damascus moment where the scales fell from my eyes and I saw this beautiful popular moment. It's more important to realize that that's not enough, right? And that things can happen that are unjust, that are destructive, that are that the majority of people don't want. And if you don't do the right sort of organizing, you're still going to lose. And so that was that's what drove me towards doing labor organizing. It's drove me to become a member ultimately of DSA, drove me to academic work that's focused on kind of on revolution and understanding what drives people towards political radical political action. I studied the American Revolution, right? And this so all of these things have been, kind of an exploration of that kind of that feeling of confusion after this huge, kind of glorious thing I saw, didn't get paid off, right? That it just fizzled. That's the question I'm trying to answer.
Yeah. And did you come up with an answer in the first 6 months, year after that loss?
No, I mean, whatever to say I have an answer is.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have one now?
No, I mean, no, you have to. I mean, there's no set pat answer. Obviously, you learn things over time. But no, I mean, it drove me first towards academic work, right? So I studied the American Revolution because I'm like, yeah, why, kind of the recall election, like one of the animating like kind of impulses of people voting against recall was that they didn't think it was fair. Like, hey, you lost the first election and you're doing like you want to redo. Like, no, that's not fair. We don't think that's right.
That's not democracy.
Right. And I was like, well, and so obviously I disagree with that, but like I was like, okay, well, why, these are ordinary people, right? They're ultimately going to be screwed by this as well. Why is this happening, right? And so I really had to, started looking at, so not the founding generation, like the big names you think of, like why are they involved in political, kind of radical political action? Looking at like, who all these artisans and journeymen and apprentices and farmers and entirely marginalized groups in the American Revolution who join up with this cause, like to push, to push out a colonial empire. And it's more complex than that. American Revolution is not all good things, right? So I'm not saying that, but I'm looking at a population for whom they see this as a genuinely liberatory movement. But I really, what drives them or what pulls them in, right? And I was often for at least the first half of my academic kind of development, really focused on ideology and like on like what are the thoughts that they have in their head and how are they thinking about things and what ideas resonate with them and what kind of structures of thought do they have that drive them towards rebellion against the king or adherence to what he's doing. But later on, what really became clear to me is that for ordinary people, right, and even for elites too, the one common thread you're seeing on why they're participating in the American Revolution is that they're getting really pressed on all sides by this emerging capitalism in the early modern world that's really pushing them in a variety of ways to try to defend their own interests, right? And so for some people, like that means fighting back against the debt they're incurring because they're buying so many enslaved people. And so obviously that is a really, boo-hoo, I'm sad for you, whatever, right? Yeah. So we don't have to worry about, we don't have to really worry about them. But like for some people, like these artisans that I study, what's happening is you have the competition from an incregetly kind of mechanizing British economy or industrializing the British economy where they can't keep up and they're just so they're getting screwed, they're getting pushed to the side and struggling to make ends meet. They don't understand this and they're looking around for answers just like I was, right? So trying to figure out what's causing all these problems. So that's, I don't know if this is kind of a tangent, but that's I think that's that the material aspect of it I think is what really became clear to me later on.
No, and I like what you're saying about ideology. I mean, I think that motivates everybody, right? I don't know if you want to trace it all the way back to religion or whatnot, but you have to have an ideology to process the world and act in it.
Without question, yeah.
And so what ideology, what mindscape, I've heard mindscape and I really like that. what mindscape draws people, attracts people to these solutions that may not be in their best interest, but feel like they're in their best interest. Right.
I think it's what you see is I think, as a materialist, ultimately, I think that the bedrock of what drives history, that motor of historical change is the changing material conditions. Because you don't reassess your worldview unless you're being forced to, right? Generally speaking, people are happy to just keep kind of petering along as they are, right? And keep doing the things that they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
It's worked well before. It's going to keep working well.
Exactly. And so, they're not going to reassess that unless suddenly it's like, well, why can't I can't sell anything I'm making anymore. Nobody's buying this. I need to buy food. What's going on? Now, people assess that where ideology comes in, I think, at that point is that people assess the world then, these new conditions, not on an objective, like, kind of social science basis. They're viewing it through the whatever lens that they started with, right? So while that material, kind of that material change is really driving things, I think it's ultimately that that ideological framework that affects how they see fit to act in that world.
Do you think we're seeing that today?
I think we're certainly in a moment where what we see is a system whereby we had some sense, and I don't think this was ever true, right? But some sense that if you worked hard and made good choices, right, that you would be capable of achieving a middle class lifestyle. Which, and by middle class I mean kind of a not a life of wealth, but one of economic security, right? Where you could think your worries were about things like, how's my kid doing in school, not where am I going to get food, right? Like,
does he have enough to eat?
Yeah, can I, is my house going to fall apart around me, or can I find some place to live? Less existential questions, right? So we had the capacity to give enough people that sort of lifestyle for a long time that you could uphold that Horatio Alger idea. At least it was plausible, right? That hard work and good choices and virtuous life that would pay off for you. You
can live the American dream.
Right, and that's that's never been true for everybody. Right? That was always racially coded. That was always not true for everybody, even who was white. Right. But there was that was at least plausible enough that people would run with it, right? And again, it's not that work doesn't matter. It's not like that's all things being equal, like, if you work hard, that'll help you succeed. But the point is, now I think what we're seeing is that, especially for people like my students, these students who are coming in after both after the 2008 crisis and then also after COVID and kind of the broken response to that. What they see very clearly is that guarantee is gone, right? And so that ideology, kind of that set of assumptions they have about what good choices consist of, or how you act in the world, and what what you're responsible for, and what what is being forced upon you. Though all of those things are shifting for them.
That's what it feels
I
like.
don't think they have a sense, and I think any of us have a sense of where that's going to land, or what kind of what set of ideas or what set of policies, or what set of kind of conditions are gonna form the basis for whatever comes after that era. But something is broken, right? So something broke down. Something's not working anymore, and we are in this to use a technical term, this interregnum of some kind, right? And so we're seeing the development of a new set of assumptions and ideas and coalitions that present political opportunities, but also some dangers, right? So I think we really are in this moment of upheaval, right? And it's in retrospect, I think we in Wisconsin started experiencing that a lot sooner than everybody else, because 2011 really represented a rupture in a lot of ways that really have changed how people in the state understand the world. So
does that that rupture in 2011 with Act 10, does that represent that fork in the road, that difference in where we're all seeing something's changing, and we're all seeing that our mindscape is not working for the world as it is right now, and this is almost like the bad path, or this is a reaction in not a positive direction? Well,
yeah, and I think one of the things to really see in that moment is that Scott Walker and the Republican Party understood how to use power to resolve the kind of the whatever tensions were latent, and create winners and losers. And they recognized the need to do that faster than a lot of other people. This is not to laud them, because they picked the wrong winners and the wrong losers, right? They paid out the wealthy at the expense of literally everyone else. But they recognized the need, and they got ahead of the curve, and they did the thing, right? They said, we're making choices, and we choose the Wisconsin manufacturers and commerce at the expense of everyone else. And So we should look at that and understand that, right? We cannot be afraid of those sorts of confrontational politics because, frankly, we have numbers on our sides, right? Without question. And I think we're seeing a lot of the rest of the country really kind of follow in those footsteps now and really try to achieve what Wisconsin did, precociously about a decade ago.
Yeah. Okay, so all these problems in this political moment that we're in, we're trying to understand our moment, trying to understand how we move forward from here as our landscape's changing with technology, with political formations, whatnot. What does a future look like where we don't take the Scott Walker path of 2011 and we take a better path, a path where the winners and losers aren't so divided and the winners aren't just the rich folk?
There's a couple of things there. We could look at like kind of ideal policy solutions, but I think that would be premature because what I think we have to consider first is what kind of politics do we need to even give ourselves the potential of implementing those things, right? And I think that's the key here. I mean, we have no democracy in the state, right? So there's no formal channels for even say you could say, all right, what we need is an expanded welfare state in the sense that there should be an increased social wage so that there's a baseline of existence that everybody has, that people don't have to worry about putting food on the table. They don't have to, like my students do, work full time while they go to school to achieve their dreams. They don't have to kind of choose between getting buying medication or paying rent like some old people do in the state. Like it is, you could talk about that. Maybe we can convince everybody. And we could get a majority on board with that. It still wouldn't matter in the state because we don't even have representative democracy. And so it's really clear. It's really clarifying because first of all, I don't think that sort of moral suasion is sufficient to change politics anyways. You need to create structures that are able to mobilize that. But yeah, I mean, it's very clear in this state that if we're gonna get our democracy back, we need to change how we do politics. And part of that means, there's an irony, right? Because I'm running for office, so that's me buying into the system. But I think what we need to do and understand it at the local level is that if we want our democracy back, then we need to use our positions of elected authority, but even just our positions, our positions in life, to organize people towards building a different world, and that means building kind of political institutions like DSA, right? Like like other formations, like what is it, the Sunrise Movement, that's the climate change movement, right? These organizations that are mass membership driven, democratic organizations driven by membership that depend on the energy, vitality, ideas, and kind of interests of just normal people, right? That they're not. That they don't have to be mediated through, kind of the big donors who give you campaign contributions. That these organizations, that we need these grassroots organizations that are capable of, of mobilizing political action on the basis of people's just own interests, right? That's what we need to see. And so, from an elected officer's point of view, right, I'm very kind of influenced. Oddly enough, by Robert Caro wrote these three huge biographies of Lyndon Johnson about his rise to power. And I don't want to emulate Lyndon Johnson in a lot of ways. But one thing that was very clear about when you study him is that he looked to use any potential position he had to leverage power. Now, for him, that power was always on behalf of the agenda of Lyndon Baines Johnson, right? So, exactly, right. But I think as kind of as people on the left, what we need to think about is that we need to use political power to even if it's at the local level, to mobilize and bring people together, to pull to pull like-minded officials from across the state together to push back against this kind of kind of one-party state we have here in the state of Wisconsin, and that means doing the hard work of talking to people, of organizing them, of trying to give them forums to come together, of doing the hard work of coming together in democratic forums where everybody gets mad at each other and disagrees and trying to hash out the right ideas. All of those things are necessary for us to build the sort of mass membership organizations we need to change politics in the state. And you know what? We have a real gift in this state, which is the fact that we have no choice. We have no choice but to do this because all the formal routes of power are cut off from us. Right? We have no capacity to change what happens if we depend on just the electoral system as we have it today.
And when you say no capacity to make change, does that mean basically the Republican-held legislature that's been gerrymandered and it's just 66%
I mean, it's
basically
not just
ever?
that, right? I mean, so yeah, that's the basis of it, right? That's once you have that in place, right, where the Republicans have a permanent like 2/3 majority or at least 60% majority in both houses. Well, I mean, even if you elect every Democrat, the Democrat can be governor from here to perpetuity. It doesn't matter. Right, and what we've seen is that the federal Supreme Court will not step in to change this, and so I'm even dubious of whether or not it will be sufficient to flip the Wisconsin Supreme Court to kind of change redistricting, because what happens at the federal level, right? It's a very partisan and Republican oriented federal Supreme Court. Will they go with what the Wisconsin Supreme Court comes up with? I have my doubts, right? So, not to say, I mean, we want
every avenue should be explored.
We want to elect the right person to the Supreme Court, but we can't depend on that to solve our problems. Okay, and but we have the baseline there of that permanent Republican majority in the legislature, and we know that if a Democrat gets elected governor, that the Republican legislature will disempower and take powers away from that person whenever they want to, right? They did that when Walker left office. They took a number of powers away from the governor's position and handed them back to the legislature.
The special sessions were
crazy.
Very interesting to me.
Crazy.
He'd call them in, they'd gavel in, gavel out within like 5 seconds.
One of the things, like the fact that the governor doesn't have control over the WEDC, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation anymore, and can't do oversight there. It's like that's in the legislature now. It was really telling, because that's like the slush fund for the Republican Party. They just throw money at big firms and then expect campaign contributions on the back end. Like, I mean, interesting left. Just a tangent, real quick. I was looking at somebody sent me the idea. This basically the law around ethics and elected officials in the state of Wisconsin, and you can't get any sort of financial remuneration as an elected official. You can't vote on things that have any sort of direct financial impact on your life. Which, yeah,
that feels right.
Do you know that Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation is exempted from that? That does not count. That if you get money from that's not part of. You don't have to worry about that. You can still vote on things, and also Department of Tourism. So what's very clear is that, it's just you don't. If you're doing the bidding of the powers that be, you can get paid. You can get paid off for that. It's not an ethical breach. In any case, but the other part of that then too is there's a number of other things. And I think the most telling one, and this is the one that just blows my mind, it's this guy Fred Prane, who's on on the board for the Department of Natural Resources, a guy whose term ended I think 2 years ago, right? But has refused to leave his position. And his justification was, there's not a new person to come in and take my position, right? The only reason there's not a person to come in and take his position is because the Republican legislature won't take up and kind of sign off on Evers' nomination for that position.
Oh, he's nominated somebody?
Oh yeah, for sure. And so they're just like, well, we're not going to do this, so Fred can stay. So basically, they have a veto power over anybody that's coming in. And so what's very clear is that now, if you're a Republican appointee, you can stay in perpetuity. You never have to leave your boards. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court actually ruled on it and said, yeah, that's fine. And so we face a situation here where basically we have lifetime appointments for Republican nominees, right? It doesn't even matter anymore. And that just blows your mind. And the fact that some dentist from Wausau who finally just clarified what was going on to me is kind of funny, right? But it's very banal, but it's very true. We don't have a democracy, and the only way we're going to be able to push back is if we have popular political organizations on the ground that can push on that front.
So how do we build these democratic institutions, groups of people, to change the political landscape, how we do politics now at the local level? Because I always try to keep it local. Where
no. I mean, we should. I mean, it should be very tangible. And I think we build these coalitions by really, I mean, first of all, it's we have to do organizing. Right? As people who are active and can be considered activists, we can try to just like decide what to do and then try to get people to show up to our event and do this, do that sort of thing, the mobilizing thing.
Yeah.
Right, and that's part of it. It's not the end of the world. Like that's a good thing to do. But I think really what we need to do is find areas where people have a real interest that's very coherent, that they know and they recognize, and start to try to build organizations and kind of connections between people on the basis of those material interests. So like in terms of labor organizing, that's very clear, right? Workers generally have an interest in safe working conditions and good wages and like a fair share of the profits of the organization. It's very clear how to do that.
Your institution, your group of people is the union.
Exactly, and so you build towards labor unions, and I'm a huge proponent of labor. I think labor is going to be the bedrock of any sort of genuinely progressive democratic movement that we see going forward. And so and that's one very, very clear place where you can start to build those sort of mass membership democratic organizations. Right? Not all unions are democratic. We all know that's a problem, and we want unions to be as democratic as possible. But there's other, if we're in political
what do we do if we're
leadership-
not in the workplace?
Right, and so if we're not in the workplace, are there interests that community members have in the state of Wisconsin, where it's very clear that the vast majority of people have an interest that's not being met by the state as a whole? I think that we're starting to see those things emerge, certainly at the level of local government, very clearly. We're seeing a debate over income taxes in the state right now, right? Where the Republican, there's a $6.6 billion surplus or something like that.
I saw that.
And then the Republicans are saying, well, we're just going to give tax cuts to everyone, right? Well, okay, so even if tax cuts go to everyone, it's very clear that first of all, the wealthy get the majority of that, and what's even more nefarious than that is that on the back end, what tends to happen is that people who are middle and working class people end up getting taxed on the back end at the local level, just so local government can keep the lights on, right? Keep schools running, keep base services going, right? And so the state's backing out of funding education and doing shared revenue, especially, means that the vast majority of people are having to pick up those taxes on the back end. So they're not even getting the tax cut that they expect. Okay, so people understand that they're getting screwed. People understand that our schools are struggling. People understand that that things are unfair at the local level, that their taxes are going up, and that they don't understand why. Well, you can build associations and organizations and movements based on that recognition to push back against what they're doing at the state. I mean, the real difficult thing there is that the state can just say, well, Republicans say we're lowering taxes, right? But so you have to make very clear the fact that that's not helping you. Right, that's helping a very few. That's helping
your
a very
sales
few
tax
people.
is going to go up. Your property tax is going to go up.
Just because your income tax bill went down, that means first of all, it means your services are getting much worse. You're gonna have to deal with the implications of that, right? And then again, your taxes are going to go up in the back end.
And the implications of that, I think, are sometimes hidden, where it's like the world around you gets worse. The worst parts in your city get worse.
Yeah.
Your schools get worse.
Yeah. What you see is, things like the teacher shortage we have in Wisconsin. You can't hire people to be teachers because I come from a family of educators. I know teachers. I'm around a ton of teachers today. I'm in education. I teach at a private school, the private university, so it's not the same. But people are like mission driven. Teachers want to teach. They love what they do. They wouldn't do it otherwise.
They'll put in 50 hours just so that their kids get that.
I mean, and that's not universal. Nothing's universal, but that's my experience with teachers. They love what they do, and the fact that they're leaving, that's not an indictment of them for not being mission driven. What that is an indication that things have gotten so bad, right? That things have gotten so tight, that they're being treated so badly, that their wages are just not keeping up with what their needs are. So much so that they're just saying, "Screw it, I got to move on." And that happens more and more. And that's part of this. It's part of a strategy, I believe, by the Republican Party to they have no problem defunding public education. because what they want is they want a stratified private education system where only a select few are educated with in an effective way, and the rest are kind of just churned out into being cogs in the wheel of our grinding economy right now. And so it's really backhanded. It's really, kind of, you have to bring people, you have to really explain it to people. But, that's a material interest that that people, that 90% of people in Wisconsin, they share the same interest in this situation. And you can try to start to build political movements, right? Political organizations on the basis of that as well. I do think labor is going to be the bedrock of this, right? On top of which, then, the other major formation would be social movements around things like police brutality and the carceral state, and social movements around immigration rights and these sorts of things as well. So those social movements as well, democratically run with mass membership sorts of affiliations, right? That's part of the puzzle as well. So you have you have a number of prongs, but I think the real key is you need to build political power on the basis of people's shared interests, and it has to be democratic and membership driven, not driven by the imperatives of a local foundation that decided that we're gonna frame the issue of of inequality around kind of the idea that people aren't getting access to the right sorts of education, so we're going to work on education curriculum or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's
we're doing
these
more
aren't bad
workforce
things.
development programs,
right? Or we'll pay to start up a few small businesses in this economically depressed area. I'm not saying these are bad things. I'm just saying they're not structural changes. They're not actually mobilizing people in a democratic way from the ground up to make social change. They're kind of throwing kind of coins to the peons as they as they suffer. Like if you catch it, then maybe you'll be okay.
You could be that lucky person.
But it's not empowering people in general. And so we need to build all of these movements in a democratic way that's organizing from the ground up.
I love that. And a quick plug for Missy Zomber, who's running for the school board.
Amen. Could not advocate more strongly. Yeah, absolutely. She's a absolute staunch advocate of public education, a real fighter, brilliant, knows policy inside and out, and she's going to just be an amazing board member. She's going to win. I got no doubt. She's absolutely one of the smartest, most capable people I've been around in my time in DSA. So yeah, sorry.
No, I love it. And I was going to say, you guys are going to hear an interview from her in a couple weeks, and you'll hear for yourself. Mm-hmm. She's just I
don't need to sell her. She'll do it herself.
Person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So going back to the village shore board. I always mess that up. Going back to the village,
the village board.
Going back to the village board of Shorewood. Sure. What can an elected official in that position, hopefully, do with that to create these political institutions? Yeah. And maybe even what can you do in your 4 years, tangible things we can get done?
I think it's 3-year term. So, but yes, fair enough.
Terms.
Yeah. One of the things I would want to do is to speak directly to your question would be to use this position to, kind of as a platform to reach out to local officials throughout the state who are seeing the same problems, who have the same ideas about how to about the need to have a kind of a ground up pushback against this Republican regime we're under.
And do you think they're seeing that from their constituents?
Are the other local officials?
Yeah. Do you think it's going to be a hard sell, or is this going to be something that?
Well, no. I mean, anything. I think there are certainly people out there who have the same analysis and are starting to see the issues. Just to give you a sense of why this occurs to me to do. When I work at Marquette, one of the things that happened a couple of years ago was there was a big pushback against during COVID, they wanted to fire a bunch of employees. They wanted to get rid of a bunch of staff, right? Because budget cuts, right? No thought of using the endowment to like tide us over to make sure people don't lose their jobs in the middle of a pandemic. Just we got to cut people, we got to cut staff, right? So obviously this is unjust, and so a bunch of us who were involved in a union campaign in the past really started pushing back against this austerity campaign as well, and really trying to build a coalition to push back against it. And one of the things we did that I thought was I think ultimately was very effective was, we're not alone, struggling, right? A lot of schools are going to use this as an opportunity to try to streamline and get rid of people, to reorganize their staffs. So we reached out to Jesuit schools around the country and said, hey, are you experiencing this? Let's build a coalition, and together really built this group that was capable of mobilizing on a national level, to have a common voice among kind of unions and faculty organizations and kind of workers organizations throughout the country at Jesuit schools to really push the Jesuit leadership, to push the church to step in on this front. Now, and not to say it worked perfectly or that it was easy to maintain, because it kind of atrophied over time, but the kind of the moral sway and the authority that you have as a collection of people from across the country, with the same voice and the same concerns, right? That mattered, and that can have an impact on what happens. And so I think going horizontal and creating those connections among local people in local government who are experiencing these same issues, everybody's faced with these things, can be very powerful. And you look for points of leverage to push back against what is inherently an unjust, kind of state of affairs. So that's just to give you a sense. I mean, that wouldn't be.
What came of that?
We, when initially Marquette wanted to talked about remaking the university and changing everything, they had talked about firing as many as 400 people. And ultimately, through what is ultimately was a wonderful and incredible campaign run by the kind of the faculty and staff of Marquette University, there were still cuts, but it went down to about 50, 60 people, right? So I'm not celebrating that to say that was what we wanted. It certainly wasn't, but we had an impact, right? And
Imagine if you hadn't been there.
Yeah, and if we hadn't been there, then it would have been dictated to us, right? So that just shows you build ground up, you build that popular, kind of will, you can have a real impact on what happens around you. Okay, anyways, I think that would be one thing, at least in terms of political strategy, how do we affect what happens? But from a policy standpoint, there are real issues faced by local government in this moment. And one of the things you see is this, there's just a lack of resources to do the things that we need to really make the quality of life in our localities better. And one of the tools that people use, and it's understandable, right? This has been happening since the 1970s. What we used to see happen in cities is if you wanted to do something, you would tax people and you'd spend money to do a program that, kind of. Like New York is the example that I always think of, right? New York had free education, higher education for everybody in the city, right?
That blew my mind when I heard that.
Right. They had public hospitals. They had all sorts of programs that were there to, right, help working class people get to a place of economic stability. And it worked, man. Those are engines of building prosperity and competence and people's ability to be economically independent. This machinery works. 1970s, what we see is this real austerity moment, and we could go into some other time, but what you see is New York almost go bankrupt. And so New York pulls back from all of that. And what we see starting in the 1970s, it's not just New York, it's elsewhere, is the way as a city that you can get things done is you can bribe the kind of the private sector to come in and operate in your area so that you can create jobs for people, right? And that's, you understand why that happens, right? You need if you don't have the money to directly aid people, right, to create a jobs program, right, then you have to draw people in. I mean, that's created a race to the bottom, though, and so economic development policy in this country, right, really revolves around giving the best deal to whatever business wants to come in and operate in your territory, and that happens at the local level too. I mean, it happens at throughout Wisconsin. Cities have to do that as well, and so I understand that, right? I think I understand why if you want your tax base to go up, if you want people to have jobs, if you want these sorts of things, you're gonna want to draw businesses in, right? But the problem is, that they don't have any loyalty to your community, generally speaking,
say.
right? I mean, and so what we see is if you don't hold them accountable for paying back that investment of public money, if we're using tax incremental financing or grants of some kind, or kind of just allowing, changing zoning laws or changing, kind of creating variances so businesses can do things that we wouldn't normally allow. Like we grant all these things to people for the sake of development, right?
I'm imagining Amazon, where all these cities were promising them huge
just chasing
$200
around,
million.
exactly. Or Foxconn, right? We had how many
here
billions
locally,
of dollars did Scott Walker offer Foxconn to operate, and they never did a damn thing, right? So no, I mean, but the point is this, like, okay, if that's the tool we have at hand, right? If that's in the state, we can't do a lot in terms of revenue generation from a local level. You can't raise more money to do certain things, to improve your schools. Like, it's very difficult. You have to do a levy and a levy increase, and that's a referendum, right? And it's all right, and people are feeling overburdened. So you want so this is an easy way to say, like, okay, well, we want these things. We'll just say, like, okay, we'll do tax incremental financing and offer some upfront money for this business to come in and operate in our territory, and long term that'll increase our tax base and blah blah blah. I get the rationale, but I think we're being too easy on these businesses. We have to have expectations about what they're going to provide to the community if we're investing public money. That's our responsibility. And so my thought is, there need to be provisions in whatever sort of deal we have with private developers. They owe us certain things, and we need to ensure that happens in law. And if we can't do that, then we have to walk away. We have to be willing to walk away, right? So, are you gonna commit to certain wages for your employees? Are you going to commit to if your workers try to form a union, will you do voluntary recognition of that? Are you going to if we want families to be able to move into Shorewood, right? Are we gonna provide subsidized housing to certain families so that they can come in and their kids can attend these schools that are really the envy of a lot of the state? Like, those are the sorts of things that if we're paying you to come in and make a profit in our territory, you owe us something, and you need to respond to what the community's needs are. We're not here just to kowtow to you, right? That's the key, and I think that's doable, right? Because there is kind of a market, and especially in the village that I'm running for office in, where it's an attractive place to develop, right? Mm-hmm. It's not there's
disposable income.
There's a ton of disposable income,
place.
Right? Absolutely. And so that's one side of it. And the other side too is we have some vacant buildings that are not that we've invested kind of TIF money in, that where businesses went belly up. And one thing we can do in those places, and I'm still working this out with some people who are really smart about it, and so I don't have this finalized yet, but maybe you bring in, maybe you have there's a restaurant facility that hasn't been able to stay open. Maybe we bring in, we allow people to operate there if they're just starting out, right? And you have a 2-week window of operations where you can come in and you can do your thing here, and free of charge, and then you can decide what you want to do on the back end, right? And you can revolve, you can be a kind of an incubator for businesses,
run.
Right? And so that's another option, and that could be done not only with restaurants, but also are there creative spaces we can create where local artisans can come in and start to operate on a revolving basis in some of these facilities that are currently vacant. There's all sorts of things we can do to do our economic development policy in a more democratic way, and that's I will admit that that's really a focus of what I'm interested in. I'm not an absolutist in either way. I'm not saying we should never do economic development, but I'm also saying that we should not do economic development if it's not to the benefit of the community, right? That's the key. And on top of that, then there's some other things, right? So sustainable infrastructure. There's a street light issue. Our street lights are over 100 years old, right? So they're really in bad shape, and we need to replace them. We need to make sure that when we do that in a way that's economic, that's environmentally sustainable. Like I've talked to some people on the doors who are saying, yeah, you could do this with solar energy, even in Wisconsin, pretty easily. Blah blah blah. So I'm interested in doing that, and also in exploring, right? can this village also be a part of any sort of anything that emerges from the Power to the People campaign in Milwaukee, where there's this desire for a public utility, right? We all know that public utilities operate at a significant cost savings to consumers, right? And also gives democratic control over what the source of energy is over time. And so I would like to at least explore that. And so these are some of the ideas I have, right? So no, and I think you can get a lot done from the local level, and more so, I think people have a thirst for this sort of thing, for the sorts of policies that are going to empower them. And I think whatever. That's why I'm doing this. I wouldn't do it if I didn't think it was valuable and that I could make a difference. So,
Do you think your policy history experience has anything to do with this? Adds a certain.
I mean, I wouldn't presume to say. I think I have a unique set of experiences that make me pretty, that make me capable of hitting the ground running, right? I mean, I worked in state and federal government in a variety of capacities, both in budget, then in government performance. I worked at a think tank for a little bit at the state level, so I know policy, right? I mean, from a broad perspective, and I've also taught political science for the last 7 years as well. So I mean, I think I have a set of experiences that it would be really valuable to the community, and I really want to share this with I love living where I do, and it's been I think it's I really I look forward to sharing these sharing my experiences and certainly my energy with the community as a whole. I can guarantee you I'll put my back into it. I don't see this as a position that is kind of just a part-time thing all the time, right? I want to put time into it. I want to invest my energy and my passion into this role, right? I will work for the people without question. What's
your favorite thing about Shorewood?
Walkability, man. It's we need to build towards having walkable communities throughout the Milwaukee area, where people are able to walk to everything they need, right? Be that groceries, entertainment, what have you, right? Coffee. There's like 8 coffee shops near where I live. So I mean, that's what a privilege that is, right? And that's what I love about it. And it's I would like to see that I would like to see most neighborhoods in the city be able to have access to that. That would be great. That'd be great. So.
I love it. That pretty much answers my question of what the difference between you and maybe an opponent would be. Mm-hmm. What you bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I've met, I'm running, one other person is in the race, a man named Arthur Sink. Really, really wonderful person. I've had a conversation with him, and really great guy. Another woman, Kathy Stokebrand, is a trustee right now, and I also met her, and is I think she's a really wonderful person. Had a great conversation with her as well. I think I think what I bring to the table is kind of a pretty broad political vision, a set of skills that are pretty unique, and a kind of a real appetite for the work. So I think that's I think I'm the right choice. That's all I can say, right?
DSA does too. If people like what they hear, if they think you're the right choice too, how can they get involved with your campaign?
I think maybe you can put the my campaign email out there. They can feel free to come out and canvass with us. I think another thing that I want to do is make sure I hit every door in the city, in the village. I'm sorry, and be able to really reach out to as many people as possible directly. They could also, campaigns are expensive. I'm running out of yard signs already, so I need to buy some more. So if people want to contribute, I'll send you an ActBlue link as well. If people, that would be helpful. Anything you can give would be helpful.
Those will be in the show notes.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to think. But I think those are the two things, right? I mean, really, if you have the time to help us out, that would be great. I would love to have you have your help with some canvassing. So yeah.
What do you think you learn on doors as a candidate when you talk to people?
It's been great, man. I mean, I'm really lucky because I love talking to people, man. It's been so much fun. So what did I learn? I've learned a number of things. I learned about the streetlights, right? So I didn't know that they were a century old, and that's so that came out of that. I learned also, what do people want? people want restaurants in the area, right? So I learned that. I learned that like there's this concern over pedantic things like parking, which are really, but that are really tangible to people, right? Like it's
That's
like
what
I don't
we
have-
interact with every day.
it's parking's really expensive, parking's really scarce. Like people are worried about that. That would not have been something that came to the fore of my mind initially, but like certainly after talking to people, it's like we have to figure out a way to have affordable parking for people who are renters and are making generally less money than most people in the community, and we need to have access to parking, right? So that the streets aren't overcrowded, right? So how do we do that? I'm not sure yet, but certainly I am thinking about it, and it's something that emerged from talking to people. So yeah,
No, and I love that. I think that's why Doors is so valuable.
amazing. Yeah.
You can look at Facebook posts, but you got to talk to actual people.
Yeah, I mean,
Really
Facebook really lends and just online communication lends itself to acrimony in general, right? You know, people misread things. People generally get go to the most extreme sorts of areas of their personality to like respond to things, and things just escalate really quickly in ways that I don't think are healthy. Which means that, you know, I'll post things on Facebook, but I really enjoy talking to people. It's been great, like meeting as many people as I have in the village, and so it's also a small enough place where I think I can get to every door. So that's also very good. So yeah, it's been and I'll have more. Trust me, I'll learn more, I'm sure, from Doors as we go along here.
I'm sure when we check in,
yeah,
you'll have more stories. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. Any last thoughts you want to share with us?
Man, I've talked your ear off already, man. But no, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak with you today, and I love your podcast. You guys are doing a great job.
Hey, thank you so much, Sam.
All right, take care.